Welcome back to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm your host, Derik Kraus. I'm joined today by Jeffery Kendall, who is the CEO of Nymbus. And I reached out to Jeffery because I was personally looking for a bank or a banking app that would allow me to use AI to conduct transactions. I know it might sound scary, but it's a little less scary than you think because AI has become very capable of doing basic things like making transfers, helping you get insights about your bank and your bank accounts and your spending. And it can all be done in ways that are safe and secure. And as I was talking with ChatGPT about the options that were out there, it mentioned Nymbus and that Nymbus had recently launched an MCP server. And if you don't know what an MCP server is, that's okay, because we're going to talk about it today. Basically, it's a way for AI to connect with an app so that the AI is able to get information from that app and even have the tools to carry out certain transactions. And Nymbus has released some MCP functionality already, and they have plans to release more in the future. And so we talked today about what can be done with an MCP server, and not just within Nymbus, but if you think about how AI is going to impact banking on a larger scale, we talk about the implications and how we see that developing as AI continues to change and the impact that's going to have on the banking industry. I'm really excited to share this episode with you. Let's dive in. Hey, Jeffery, welcome to the show.
Derik, how are you today? Great to see you.
Yeah, same. So I was telling you before we hit record, but to set the stage for everyone else that's listening, the way that this chat happened is I was personally looking for a bank or some sort of solution that would let me use AI to conduct transactions in my personal bank accounts. So in our business, we do profit distributions every quarter. And so what that means is I have a sum of money that I then need to divide up into a bunch of different accounts because I do envelope budgeting. And I found it's really helpful for me to divvy things up into different accounts that way. But what that means is every quarter I've got to do 20 to 30 transfers between all my different bank accounts. And it's not that it's hard, it's just it's tedious and it's kind of a waste of time. And so then my wife is always like, have you done those yet? Like, no. And so it's always like a month after I get the money before I actually do all of these transfers. So I thought, man, I know AI can queue all of this up because I use AI a ton. There's got to be something out there that would let me not even, I know a lot of people are worried about AI making mistakes with banking, but with human in the loop as a concept, I'm not even necessarily saying AI just go and do it all for me, just queue it up for me and I'll click the approve button. So anyway, I was looking for something like that for myself, and I was asking ChatGPT if there was some bank, some solution out there. And it was like, I'm not seeing anything that exactly does that, but Nymbus just released an MCP server that's, and I was like, oh, Nymbus, like I gotta text Jeffery and we gotta talk about this. So that's the context for the call. So I guess first question is just what does the MCP server do? Like what are some of the main use cases for this MCP? Well, I guess maybe we even need, I think a lot of people listening won't even know what an MCP server is. So maybe let's set the stage there, and then we can talk about like what a bank or a credit union could do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I do think there's a lot of misunderstanding around AI obviously going on. And, there are big topics, AI broadly, that scare people. And then there are things that we're all really comfortable with. And I think we're all learning how to talk about it and make sure that we're clear on how we're talking about AI so that it doesn't sort of trigger some of these, maybe sort of irrational fears when they're not applicable to that particular point. But yeah, I mean, at the very basic of what an MCP server is it stands for Model Context Protocol, and it sounds fancy and sounds technical, but all it's saying is there are going to be models. Think about your favorite LLM, OpenAI's, ChatGPT, Opus, and all sorts of different LLMs out there, Anthropic, Sonnet, and et cetera. Those LLMs are capable of doing a lot of different things. But the model context protocol exists basically to say, hey, if you want data and you want to interact with me as an LLM, I'm going to tell you some certain rules or some things about how I'm going to work with you and how I'm going to respond. So it's almost like the next level definition of rule sets that we apply to APIs today. So if you think
Right.
about how an API works, it's all about a transactional set. It's either reading data out or writing data in. It's, basic
Mm-hmm.
operations like that. But what an MCP server does is it says, okay, well, I know I need to get data in and out of that system, but what is the rules around it? Can I do this for anybody? Like, can I update anybody's transaction? Or do I have to do it only for the current context of the authenticated user? Like, that's a good example of something that an MCP server can be set up to basically control those parameters. Now, that doesn't mean that it sort of it guarantees perfection from a model, but that is one of the
Sure.
ways that it gets safety, because when that LLM starts transacting, then the MCP server is going to enforce whatever protocol logic that needs to be there. Hey, if you're going to make a call of this nature, we're going to audit and we're going to log every sort of part of the transaction. That might be another thing that the MCP server does above and beyond what a just normal API would do. And that's the power of it, is it just sort of lets you get in a more general way rather than being locked to a very tight description of a transaction.
Right. Yeah. So specialized type of API that an LLM can connect to that gives that AI agent tools so that it can do certain tasks and information about how to use the tools and the different workflows that it should go
That's right.
through.
That's right. So
Yeah.
if I just logged into Claude or ChatGPT or your favorite AI tool and said, go log into my bank account, it's going to be like, I don't know how to do that. Or first off, it
Right.
should tell you, no, we're not going to do that. But if it does, it's going to basically do something like trying to control your browser. But if
Yeah.
an MCP server existed for your bank, you could point it at that URL and say they have an MCP server, and it's going to auto discover it, pull it out, and go, oh, okay, now I know what this is. I know where it is, what I can do in it, and how to be safe about it. That's really it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a story for you about that, what you just said. If you ask ChatGPT or your favorite AI tool to go and log in or use your like do something in your bank account. So several months ago, I was telling you about all those transfers I have to make every quarter, and I uh, I was using ChatGPT Atlas browser for a while,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is pretty good, and there are other great ones as well, like Comet from Perplexity is really good, but I was using Atlas, and my personal bank accounts are primarily with Ally Bank, and I said, I'm going to see if I can get ChatGPT within Atlas using browser control to execute these internal
Hmm.
transfers for me. And so I tried to get it to do that, and it would go like up to the point of choosing the account I wanted to transfer money from and transfer money to. But then I think once I asked it to put a dollar amount in the field, it was like, "Oh, this is a banking app. I can't
Hmm.
do that for you." I was like, "Dang it," because I really wanted to be able to do that. So then I ended up building a prototype of a Chat GPT banking app where you open up Chat GPT and that connects, to an external app like a banking app. And it was just a prototype, but like it was a demonstration to me that like your next banking app might be Chat GPT or it might be Claude. because as long as it can connect to that external app and it's got different tools and it's got workflows and rules around how it operates, then I was able to tell that prototype, make these 10 different transfers for me, and it would queue them all up for my approval. And then I just hit the approve button, and then it would go and execute all of them. And that's just one example, but I think that's the power of the types of user experiences we're going to be seeing rolling out the next few years, if not months, is banking experiences that are made more efficient and easier and more intelligent with AI. And I, uh, leading up to uh, this podcast, I went and looked at your LinkedIn, and I saw just within the last few days, you said prediction: the next generation of digital banking won't be an app from Q2, Alchemy, or Backbase. It will be your favorite AI chat app.
Yep.
So it seems like, yeah. Tell us more about
Yeah,
your thinking there.
yeah, you and I are aligned, and I think that one of the things, and I think this is fairly it, people who are interested in user experience are starting to talk about this model where software design in context of AI and natural language, some of the things that we're used to using a very simplified, a point and click style user interface, that
Mm-hmm.
may always be around and be something that we need. But there are a lot of new ways of interacting with software that I think people are becoming more increasingly comfortable with. And it's interesting if you go back. Someone made a comment on the LinkedIn post that I thought was really interesting. They said, "Yeah, we tried to do this like 10 years ago with Alexa." And I remember all of the hype in digital banking around, hey, Alexa skills, and we can program Alexa to tell you what your balance is. But the use cases, I think, were people just weren't thinking creatively in terms of the art of the possible. That if you could
Mm.
really disconnect from a touchscreen interface, what would be the art of the possible in banking? And
Mm.
now with AI, I think we're all seeing the possibilities day to day to day. And so there was another comment on there like, well, why would you do that? It's risky. And what could you do with, Claude or ChatGPT that you couldn't do with your app? And there's actually thousands of use cases that are very,
Right.
very key use cases that we could do. And I think there's a little bit of people are sort of so used to just interacting with banks the way that we do that it's hard for us to imagine doing it a different way, even though there might be a better way, right? And so that's where I think this is going to start. Some of the power users and people who want to do things connecting their software programs and their apps together, they're going to be the ones
Yeah.
leading in terms of using it for this. So there's a company that I admire, a tech company that I've used for years called IFTTT. And it basically is a website, stands for if this, then that. And all it
Oh yeah.
is
Yeah.
it's a simple, it connects to, system A to system B, and it puts its own little rule engine in between it. So I can literally go onto there and say, hey, if it's raining outside, send me a text. Or if it's raining outside, lock all the doors on my house at my home, right? Anything that can sort of be
Right.
controlled programmatically or automated can do that. And a few years back, there was actually a bank called HM Bradley or Neo Bank, and I don't think they're in formation any longer, but they had a really, really cool feature that they deployed. And I thought it was the only original thing that had been done in digital banking in a decade. And they created these things called routines where you as a user could go in and define your own workflow logic for your banking habits. So you could say, okay, I'm going to write a very specific rule that says, yeah, make this transfer for this amount on that day, but only do it if this account balance here has sufficient amounts to cover my pending balances, right?
Yeah.
So you could sort of start being more intelligent versus just schedule, click, send, cancel, sort of binary type transactions. That's sort of why I get excited about this idea of a userless interfaceless user interface, maybe the way they're put it. But this idea that I could basically say, hey, I've got Claude connected to a lot of things in my life now. It's connected to my Gmail accounts, my calendar, like it knows everything about me. And I imagine use cases that say, hey, look for my calendar and, oh, my son's going back to university on August 15th. Make sure I have enough money in the account that I use to fund his tuition, right? Those are things
Yeah.
that I could just easily tell Claude to handle, and I don't need to worry about whether or not my bank can support it or not if it had access to the transactional data it needed to do that. Now, I think that we're years away from this being common or ubiquitous in the way that people use their mobile apps per se. But I do think that there will be power users and people who are just curious about what can be done that'll start demanding these things now. And so if I'm a bank or a credit union, I think that I could have an advantage if I had that capability early, because there will be people who are willing to move their accounts to go to a place that has that kind of capability. And to your point of your story, my guess is, no discredit to Ally Bank, but if a new bank popped open tomorrow that could allow you to do that, you'd be like, I'm going to think about opening an account there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, my business partner, we were talking about something related to this, and he shared with me Mercury Bank, which is
Yeah.
another, you're familiar with them?
Yes, yeah,
Uh,
and they announced they have an MCP server available into their digital front end, which I think is fantastic. That's an example of like you can start doing some of these things now. Now, just because somebody has an MCP server, you got to know what that means, because that doesn't always mean that all the
sure.
tools will be available. And for example, in some of our early MCP capabilities that we didn't release enough features to let somebody do everything I just described. That's where it's going, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And so when I looked into Mercury Bank a little bit, and I think I looked into their MCP capabilities, and it was mostly read capabilities, so you could use
Hmm.
it to analyze your transactions and what you're spending money on, and get information and insight. But then they also have an API, and I was like, well, I suppose I could make my own little app that I connect my LLM with, and have it just use the API to do this stuff. So yeah, I was totally already thinking in that direction of, I could see using something like Mercury for our business, but also for my personal finances, because that's one of the few solutions I've seen on the market so far where that might be a possibility. So yeah, I agree with you that most people are not going to be uh, ready or even looking for AI to do this stuff for them for the next little while. Maybe it's a few years out, but there are going to be power users, and because in most people that I talk with about AI, like, there are people in my closer circle where, like, others that work with me, like, we're using AI every day, all the time. And so they're much more familiar with it. But then I talk with people that are more outside of that inner circle. And a lot of them are like, yeah, I maybe ask ChatGPT a question once a week, where there's still, I think, a big gap in, like, those that are power users versus the general population, which, I mean, speaking of that, I know you kind of touched on something similar to that on LinkedIn a few weeks ago as well, where uh, you mentioned something to the effect that for a lot of financial institutions, they're kind of locked down, where the people within the institution don't even have access to use tools like ChatGPT, and so that's something that could be, holding them back from AI adoption, really understanding what it can do.
It is. And I think that, I love that you talk to people about this stuff, because I feel like right now it's so important to have conversations with people that are just different than ourselves. Like, I try to talk to people who aren't software CEOs and who are like construction workers, or I'll bend the ear of somebody sitting next to me at the breakfast counter, and
Yeah.
talk like, what are you doing with AI? Like, what do you think about it? And I gain a lot of interesting perspective. And almost always I learn something I didn't know. Even no matter who I'm asking, I get some idea about like why this random stranger, uses AI. And so that's kind of fun. But I do think that the conversations that I'm having with bank CEOs and people in leadership positions there, most of them understand like there's a big tsunami of power and capability and things coming here. They're learning more and more specifically what that means. Like, oh, I can automate some things. I can connect systems together. I can get processes and better controls in place in some place. But almost every single one that I talk to says we just don't have the tech talent to invest in building out the architecture and infrastructure that where we're going to be comfortable going into AI at scale. And I
Mm.
think that there's going to be a, a a sort of friction or checkpoint or gate that banks are hitting where they're like, we really want to take advantage of some of these things, like the capabilities to do that. But if they're not built into our product, we're sort of not able to do anything with it. And so they're feeling a little bit captive, I think, to their vendor providers. So
Hmm.
if I'm a bank right now, I would be looking at, my core provider, my digital provider, all the different people that I work with and paying attention as to like, are they going to be developing these things that I'm going to get efficient, or am I going to be stuck with a vendor who's like 5 years behind the times?
Yeah.
And I think that that's the right way to look at it. Is from that perspective of like you need to be doing something, but honestly, if you're relying on your vendors for your AI strategy, you're probably not going to get the value that you could. You're miss out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell everyone what you don't want to say, Jeffrey. Switch to Nimbus because they. No, but really, I think a challenge that a lot of people are facing is they want to do these things with AI, but if if you have a system that was not built for AI from the beginning, then you end up hitting real roadblocks where you're trying to shove AI into a system that was not built for AI, and you end up shackling AI's
Mhm.
ability to do things. And we're seeing this firsthand because so we've been in the business of building websites for financial institutions for the last 11 years, and we build on WordPress. And since AI really exploded onto the scene, what was it, like 3 years ago with
Mhm.
ChatGPT 3.5? That's when it really took off. From the beginning, we were like, okay, how well can this design web pages and web interfaces? And initially, not very well. And then it got a little bit better where we could get it to make individual components, like just a section of a page really well, and then we could stack those on top of each other. But then it's not like it didn't have full context for the whole page, so stuff ends up being disjointed. But now today, I don't know if you've checked out Claude Design yet,
Mhm.
but it's pretty incredible what it can do. And then you hand off to Claude Code, and I ended up building a. I was talking with a credit union that wanted a new website, and within like I was like, I got to see what I can accomplish with Claude Design, Claude Code combined, and I built a full 61 page credit union website uh, in like a few hours. That was beautiful, and it got A ratings on all of the Google Page Speed Insight scores. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, wow, when we've tried to like get AI to work within WordPress, within that existing framework, AI is very limited in like it's got to try to work within that structure. There's this rigidity that is keeping it from being able to fully do what it's capable of. And so I think that's what you're talking about in the same, you know, different context, but with core banking or with online banking, if you've got these legacy systems that just weren't built in a way that AI can fully leverage, you're going to be roadblocked and you're going to be shackled to
There,
like pretty
there are so many
limited.
constraints right now that are, I think, holding people back as well. And I think every company has to look at what they're going to be doing and strategizing this. I feel very fortunate. I am a technologist by background. I was actually a graphic designer starting out my career, the very first of it. So I have a lot
Oh,
of
awesome.
opinions on UX and design, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
Claude's design stuff is getting really good, but I also think like you can tell design by AI like doesn't take much to figure out whether or not something was built by AI. And I think that there's still a lot of slop design out there that
Oh, sure.
is going to be a while before it gets great, but it will get there. But one of the things that I feel very confident about is really being able to understand sort of the predicated risks and technology that are going on with the models and everything right now. But we hear quite a bit of people that work at other companies saying like, I mean, we get applications from engineers going like, "Hey, do you guys have any jobs open? Because like my current company won't let me use Claude Code. Like I can't use any of these tools." And I won't name names, but they all start with an F. And like, people are going in and trying to be like, "Hey, I've been working on COBOL now for 20 years. If I don't start working with some of these AI tools, I'm going to get left behind." And if my employer
Yeah.
is now saying like, "I'm going to hold you back," this is not a great, not long for the world is kind of how I see it. And when you're a $40 billion, $30 billion company with hundreds of thousands of employees, it's tough to roll out things fast. So if you're one of the F words and you're trying to say like, "Hey, we're going to make a pivot and go to AI driven processes," I run a 300-person shop, and I know how challenging it was just to make sure that everybody had the right technology in place. Like everybody's laptops were, had the right permissions on it so that, we could do the things that we wanted to do. It was not
Yeah.
easy getting us to a point where we're operating the way we are now. And we're still not, well, I wouldn't say we're great. I'd say we're good and we're right where we need to be, but we're not like there's more room for improvement. And I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge for this thing, seeing the adoption that it could have. It's just that it's just going to be hard to move it through the big companies as fast as you can through a mid-size or a smaller company. And I'm going to use that as an advantage, right? That is absolutely going to be one of my predicate. And the big companies will be out there and they'll be putting marketing messages out. You just saw one last week from another F word, and it's like, okay, lots of announcements. Where's the meat, right? Lots of
Mm.
intention. Did it happen, right? And so I hate press releases that are about things that are going to happen. It should be about things that have happened, and that's where I think we need to pay attention.
Yeah. So to that end, you put out a press release that you did put out an MCP server. So uh, tell me a little bit about what can be done with that MCP server today, and then where you see that going.
Yeah, so we had a very important problem that we were trying to solve quickly. And when we looked at it, the MCP server, building that out and investing in that part of the product was the fastest way to solve the problem. And actually, the problem was for ourselves. It wasn't
Mm.
even for our clients that we were doing it initially. I mean, ultimately, it makes us better, it makes them better. But we had a challenge where, we support a lot of the call centers that our clients run for these digital brands that we help them launch. And, if I have to add humans every time I add a client, that doesn't scale and that model then breaks for me. And so
Hmm.
in terms of looking for efficiency, we believe that chat, agentic chat, agentic voice, those things are getting good enough now that where they're not a frustrating experience, they're, a good
Right.
user experience. But if somebody wants to call in into a call center and they're talking to an AI agent, how do you authenticate them securely and safely? And that was where we were starting to say, like, hey, we'd like to take advantage of some of these automated tools that are out there for client support, customer support, things like that. But we don't want it to be a bad experience. And that means that it has to be super well thought out. As we were thinking through those flows, we were like, this is where an MCP server makes tons of sense for us. Because now when somebody calls in on a phone line, if an agentic AI agent answers, now we know how to authenticate that person over the phone, but it's tying back into the core. So
Yeah. Very
again, what
cool.
really drove the MCP need was there is no user interface to solve that problem, right?
Hmm.
You could solve it if you're on your phone and it's an app. You could do all sorts of things. But what about somebody that calls in and they're just doing voice-based authentication? And oh, by the way, just because your voice, people that are using the voice as the key, that doesn't work anymore because it's super easy to imitate AI, imitate someone's voice with AI now. There's
Mm,
companies and I could upload and make your voice say whatever I want to in 30 seconds. So
right.
that's not really a secure auth anymore, if you will. So there's that. Those are the things that we're seeing, and then also we are one of the features that we're building into our core is we obviously have a user interface for back office staff to go in and look at clients and things like that, but we're also embedding a chat style window for the staff when they're using the core where they can just basically ask the model to explore anything, and it's perfectly isolated to their technology in their instance. So it's not going outside the web; it's going right to them. But it's querying the server and going back and bringing back information for the teller, for example. So
Cool.
client
Yeah.
walks
So
in to make a transaction. User there, they could just say, "Hey, when was the last time Jeffrey came in?" And they don't need a button. They don't need to go click there. It can just tell them like, "Oh, he was last in on the 25th and did this transaction." And oh, by the way, he could probably use a new mortgage. Yeah.
mm,
And those are the things you put that chat window in there. It's totally doable right now. So that's those are the things that we're creatively thinking of to try to expand the application.
that's awesome. So for all internal use right now, correct?
Hmm.
So not anything that's going to the end user, the customer, or the member. It's all for the credit union or bank employees to use internally for customer support or for frontline interactions with their
That's right.
customers. Yeah.
That's right.
But that those applications are really powerful. Like you're talking about having a chat interface there where instead of having to go and try and find all of the information about a particular customer, just being able to chat and ask AI, that can produce a lot more efficiency.
It really can, and I think that banks and credit unions should be paying attention to this because we already have this concept of, I think it's a preview of what could be the future. So I'm a big fan of the tool Monarch, but I think people use different aggregation tools, Mint, things like that in the past. And the banks need to understand it's like people don't think about just one account anymore or, oh, I do all my banking. I have 10 bank accounts. I've got investment accounts. I've got vehicle loans.
Yeah.
When you can bring all that together in one perspective, that's really what things like Monarch and folks are doing through open banking is being able to use, Plaid and other types of connectors to pull and extract transaction data and do that. I think that's a baby example of what things are going to look like, that open banking and PSD2 and 3 have really started influencing. I think it's going to go on steroids now. If you think about what's anticipated in PSD2 and 3, it's like there's not a lot out there about like what's going on in AI now. Will government get involved and say, hey, it's not just good enough that you have to give access to your data to your clients, you have to give them the power to transact on it? That could be
Hmm.
legislation someday. So paying attention to how people are using it and what the use cases are, I think is super important right now.
I've got a big question that I've been thinking about, and I'm really curious to hear what you think. It seems like when if you're a company thinking about using AI to provide an end user experience, there are two different routes you can go. You can either go the route of putting an AI agent inside of your existing user interface. So imagine if you're a bank, you've got a standard mobile banking app today. So one route would be, well, inside of our mobile banking app, we're going to have an AI agent that you can now work with to conduct transactions or get information within our mobile banking app. So you still go to their banking app, open it, and that's where you interact with the AI. On the other hand, what we were talking about a few minutes ago, the LinkedIn post you made, the prototype that I made, that was going into ChatGPT or Claude. You go to the AI app
Mm-hmm.
first, and then within there, you have a connector or you have apps that you can connect to within ChatGPT, and then you never go to the bank's mobile app. You just you connect to their app, or you connect to their you connect to their MCP server, and ChatGPT is the interface. And I'm curious. I've been like, which I can see pros and cons either direction. Which way is it going to go? Is it going to be both to some extent? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see a lot of that model sort of start evolving. Maybe not in banking yet, but we see it in sort of other apps. It's like that kind of companion AI agent within the app in the context of the
Right.
app, not external. So I totally agree. And I think that's probably where people will start in terms of, hey, I want to use AI to do this, but I want to, sort of do it in a natural language or something like that. Like think about, I jokingly said to one of my clients, just said, "Hey, the next mobile app's just going to be a chat window, so it's going to be easy to
Yeah.
deploy."
No,
and
seriously.
and that could be the case. I think the only difference there, and I think it's a great step, and it'll be an interesting first step, but it won't get you all the way to like. Then you still have this problem of, great, I can now do things within this bank, but I can't do anything with the rest of the world, and sort of bringing
Right.
that in and connecting it in. So that agent within the banking experience that's sort of sponsored by the bank itself, if you will, that agent's not going to be able to have access to my Gmail calendar or those sorts of things. Maybe, I mean, maybe you could build that, but you'd have to build it. So, do you lose some of the power of the things that you could automate in your life that way?
Yeah, it seems like that is the major trade-off, because if you integrate the AI experience into your existing app, then like the business that does that, you can have more control around that experience, and you can build around that experience more
Mhm.
easily, but it's not connected to all the other things in their life. Versus I have this thought that I think it's pretty likely that the way that AI is going to evolve is people end up having like one AI agent that like helps them run everything in their life. Like I've been experimenting with OpenClaw, and it's been really fun and really fascinating. And it's an agent that can run other agents,
Mhm.
and you can then connect it to anything and have that one agent that helps you with everything across banking, calendar, Gmail, other personal stuff. So I don't think most people are to that point. They're still thinking about it more like, I just go to the Chat GPT app or the Claude app. Not like not to put it into a maybe more familiar terms, like Iron Man's Jarvis, right? Like Jarvis is
Mhm.
with him everywhere. It's in his suit, it's in his lab. He's got one Jarvis that helps him everywhere. And I think if depending on how that evolves, that might determine like do people just go to the AI app first and connect to the bank that way, or do they still go to the banking app and talk with the
Yeah.
AI within the app?
There's an interesting example, I think, too, of why you might want to do that and why not. So I use a lot of personal productivity tools and AI, but maybe about a month ago, I started using Claude specifically just to basically like get all the data from my calendars, get all my meeting recordings, transcripts, everything out of Zoom automatically, and it basically ingests it every single day, pulls out to do items, tasks, follow ups, stores a copy of the transcript with context. I can send it to someone else if they want to have a review of it or whatever. And so I've been sort of using Claude ad hoc to store all the memory and everything and bring it back to me. And hey, what are my open tasks? And it's fine. It does, it got me what I needed. But then as I was like wanting to use it more and more, I'm like, well, I want to change that task. Well, if you do that, you got to type out everything and tell it. And it's like, oh, well, I should be able to just click and change it. Right. And so
Mm,
then I was like, well, all right, maybe it's better if I build an app around this. So I did. I used Kiro to build an app I called Task Lister, and it's the web app. But now Task Lister is what I'm interfacing with to do specific tasks when I'm on my phone because it's easier than
Ah,
trying to
cool.
chat or talk with Claude. So there are cases where the user interface won't make sense for that. I'm not saying it's going to be, a panacea for everything, but it will open up new opportunities. And I think we're going to start seeing just sort of more engagement in different things that are channels in that regard. So it's an important point. And I think software needs to consider that as people are building.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Like you said earlier, things are happening so quickly. You kind of just gotta,
Yeah.
to some degree,
It,
see how things develop.
if you don't like it now, wait 6 months. I'm sure it'll be different. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So right now with your MCP, it's internal. It's for frontline support. Where do you see taking the MCP in the near future?
Yeah. So the next level will be to allow our clients to deploy it to their end customers.
Okay.
And one of the things that you have to do when you have something like that, an MCP server, is that you need to establish, authentication and trust is absolutely key. And so
Yeah.
that's probably the heavy lift for things is to say things like token management, access management. We've got a lot of thinking that we've done around in terms of like, okay, if a client needs to have access to MCP, do we make them go download a client secret, a key, you know, attach that into Claude? That's the way you connect an MCP server. And so, the handling of that and the cycling of keys and everything, there's work to be done there and thought through. But that is where the next go. And I'd say, you should see something like that from us in less than 6 months.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So that will mean that anyone that's on the Nymbus core will be able to deploy MCP server functionality to their end users.
Correct. Yeah. They'll choose.
Wow.
They don't have to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they can turn
Yeah.
that off. But yeah, if clients want to expose their bank accounts as MCP connectable accounts, that's the goal.
Yeah. And are you planning to roll out like as a like read data first before you allow people to write, or are you going to come out the gate with read
Now the
and
next
write?
big work will allow write. That's
Oh
key.
wow.
Right now, read is pretty well figured out. We've got that, and we're just choosing not to expose it. But the
Okay.
writing
Yeah.
part is the key. That's where you have to be careful.
Okay, that's exciting. And I'm curious, have you had any conversations with clients about that yet, where the conversation of, are you going to deploy those AI features in app versus just let people connect to it from, say, ChatGPT?
Yeah, I would say our clients are, you know, they're very, very much paying attention to the conversation going on right now. But I think they're taking our lead and very much saying like, "Hey, we trust you guys." I mean, to be honest, we're the ones driving this sort of pattern and
Yeah.
exploration more so than our clients are asking us for it. But it's because we
Yeah.
kind of see, we know where the puck's going a little bit here and maybe have an advantage on that. So we've got conviction beyond our client. I'm a little bit in that space of, I don't know if it was Henry Ford or who the quote was, but it's like, if you ask your clients what they want, they would have told you a faster horse.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think there's a little bit of that right now, which is like, tell somebody to like, oh, we're going to put AI in, and they put it in like kind of in the old way. It's like, well, you just sort of set it in there as a feature versus making it take over the whole workflow. Like that's the power. So,
Hmm.
so we're definitely working with our clients to collaborate on it, but we're doing a lot of the driving.
Yeah. Well, I'm super excited to see where you go with it. I There's one more angle that I want to talk about, because my observation with Nimbus's clients is that not only with Nimbus are they getting a technological edge, but most of them also have an angle in which they are differentiated,
Mhm.
and like they're focusing on a specific niche or segment or solution that is not commoditized. And I feel like this is really important because if you're a credit union or bank and all you do is adopt the next wave of technology, you go from being branch based to having a great mobile and desktop experience, let's say. And then you go from that to having an MCP server so people can interact uh, via AI. But if your products are still commodities, then once everyone has adopted that next wave of technology, you're still left as a commodity. You're still competing on rates. So I was looking at the Nymbus website right now, and on the labs page, it says it's like step one, focus on a segment with a known affinity. And I just like to hear some of your thinking around this because, yeah, it seems to me like the technology is important, but technology is the delivery mechanism. Uh, the underlying value or like the content of what you provide. I think most credit unions and community banks are in a commodity crisis right now because uh, most of them grew up before the internet, and their differentiation was being in a physical location where their competitors were not. Proximity was the differentiation, and now proximity is no longer a requirement. And now, so they've become commodities.
I think that the definition of community has changed, and therefore the definition of community banking has changed, right? I mean, we used to think of community as being very geographic. I live in
Yeah.
Boulder, Colorado. That's my community. But really, like, I'm a motorcyclist. My community is my motorcycle riding buddies.
Mm.
I spend more time online talking about motorcycles than I do talking to people in Boulder. So
Yeah.
where's my real, affinity and community being driven from? And I think you're 100% spot on in terms of if you're a community bank, you have no way to differentiate in terms of the products and services that you deliver. And you can walk into any room full of bank CEOs and say, what makes you different? And the fun part is to say, what makes you different? And don't say the word relationship or service because everybody says that.
Oh, yes.
It's
I've
like,
heard that
ooh,
1,000 times.
yeah. And you watch the struggle on their face being like, but I mean it. And, you're like, of course you have great service. Of course your customers love you. That is 100% true. But that's not why they're sticking with you, right? They're sticking with you because it's harder to leave. That's it.
Mm.
And if you're offering the same thing that Chase and Bank of America are, you don't have much of a reason to keep them. We encourage people to say, hey, instead of doing a generic debit card or product, get in and focus and say, what would it take to make this unique and valuable to this particular market, to a truck driver, to an electrician, to, a 14-year-old versus an 80-year-old. You've got to know who you're solving the problem for to do that. Where I think this ties into AI really, really clearly is banks and credit unions now have sort of the tooling to enable a strategy like this. Whereas before it was like, wait, I got to go build into my digital banking features all these things that make a product unique to a truck driver. Well, that's expensive
Mm.
and that takes time and that's been hard to do. And we've been doing it as Nymbus for many, many, many years, but it's expensive and takes time. The amount of speed that we now have with AI driven development, we can turn out these new capable, sort of bespoke features for market segments in sometimes days, if not hours. So it really is like, I think with the advent of the building part of AI, now we actually have the ability to tap into these capabilities and hooks and develop and create more. And Ron Shevlin posted an awesome article recently, like the past couple of days on his Substack, about he believes that creativity, not technology, is the new differentiator for banks. And I think he's right.
Mm.
And I made a comment on his post as basically I don't think technology's been a differentiator for banks, and I'll be honest, because they all run there's three cores that matter in this country, and there's three digital banking platforms that matter in this country. And between the three of those, they probably own 80% of the market share. So how differentiated are you through your tech if you're buying a front end from Alchemy? You're not. Great product, great people, love them. When 700 other credit unions and banks have it, you're not differentiated. So that's it is the creative application of the technology, not the technology itself.
Right. Yeah. That's something I think about a lot. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I guess wrapping up here, if you were to make an invitation or a recommendation to credit unions or banks that are listening and they're thinking about the application of AI within their institution and they're thinking about differentiation, what would you recommend to them? Like what would be the
So
first step?
I, number one, talk. Just ask the question. Be curious. Ask people what they're doing with AI. Get into the mindset of doing that. You'll learn so much faster. That's number one. I think every bank and credit union CEO should be in that mindset right now. The other thing I tell people all the time is like, find somebody you trust who knows a lot about this stuff, who doesn't have a vested interest in what you're doing necessarily. So everybody's got a brother-in-law or a kid in college or their neighbor or whatever that, they could talk to. I think those are resources that, you know, that you're going to find tons of content online. And I think a lot of it's AI generated content. I think it's really helpful to just see a person's face and talk to them, like, what are you really doing with it? What are you really seeing the advantage of? You go through, LinkedIn and you feel like, every day it's like, oh, we just made $1 million in MRR and we have 2 employees. And you're like, okay, really? Is
Yeah.
that true? And,
Sounds
there's no
awesome.
backup of it. A lot of
Yeah.
claims out there that are being made that aren't supported necessarily. So, but yeah, I think it's talk, it's educate yourself. That's it. It's the only way that you're going to get comfortable with whether or not somebody like me is, trying to sell you something that's a pig in a poke. So that's absolutely the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Just start a conversation. Well, Jeffrey, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a
It's been
fun
great, Derek. It's
conversation.
always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you for everything you do to push the industry forward.
Thanks. Same.
All right.